Good evening. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for watching. This is our weekly current events program in English. With me today, my guest in the studio is Dr. Rosalind Borge-Knight, and thank you very much for joining.
Thank you, Leah, for the invitation. It's a real pleasure to be on your program this evening.
Thank you very much. We've got something a bit different today. We're focusing on the United States, and you'll see visuals very soon about the US presidential election, the way COVID's been handled, and the murder of George Floyd, which was in all the news all around the world with the protests. And our first guest, we're joining Her Excellency Gina Abercrombie Winstanley, who is based in the United States now. She's former ambassador of the United States to Malta, and she commutes between Washington and also her hometown of Cleveland. Good evening, Your Excellency.
Good evening, Leah. Good to see you.
Good evening. I hope you're well. I hope you're well.
We're very well indeed.
Good. And where are you based right now as we speak to you?
Yeah. Right now, I am in the state of Ohio. We have had a very good leadership with our governor who locked down very quickly. And in fact, we have got our deaths from COVID down to 3 in the last week or so. So we have been making really good progress here. And now we are struggling with how to manage that reopening, how much freedom we give individuals to take care of each other with wearing masks and other steps like that.
There's been a very big discrepancy between the way COVID's been handled from one state to another. And in fact, today, I can't remember the figures, but on CNN, it named a few states that were much higher than the others. What's the reason for that?
I think, as I said earlier, we struggle. So California, Oklahoma, Florida, Arizona, I think are the states where the numbers have gone up quickly. So California, with a Democratic governor, has said everyone must wear masks in public. Other states are saying they're recommended, but they're not required. And I think we have a good understanding that the science says wearing a mask is going to help stop the spread of COVID. And then people get into I shouldn't have to be wearing a mask. You can't tell me to wear a mask. And it's that American individualism and freedom. And I believe that our government needs to make a stronger effort to remind us about our responsibilities as citizens, that we have a responsibility for each other. And there are many places where that is recognized, and we need more help with the public messaging to help others of us. Remember that. We're responsible for each other.
Absolutely. I know we've also done a lot of volunteering, as we spoke last time. I'd like to address the horrific murder of George Floyd and perhaps get some first-hand account from you, because you've also obviously been in touch with this at a closer proximity than we have.
Well, I will say, like many people around the world, I was out demonstrating last Saturday. Sunday, there was another demonstration. I dare say there will be some this weekend as well. I think this murder and this time, certainly in America, if not more broadly, is a different time. Black people in America have been tired for a long time and ready to be accepted at that face value that we give each other as human beings, to have the benefit of the doubt and to have the opportunity to reach our fullest potential as we try and live and serve in our nation. We are at a time now where majority Americans, European Americans, are also getting this. In Ohio, where I am now, there was a terrible murder a few years ago of a 12-year-old boy who had a toy gun and was shot in seconds by a city police officer. A city police officer who disobeyed the rules of how he should have conducted himself and yet faced no prosecution. And that child, 12 years old, was shot dead. So when people were demonstrating after that here, the vast majority of demonstrators were African Americans. And it was heartbreaking because we felt this is a child. This should be considered everyone's child in the community, this greater community of Cleveland, Ohio. The difference from what people saw with George Floyd's murder is that people have come out and they are white and they are Black and they are Hispanic and they are Asian and they are gay and they are straight. We are all Americans and we are all now saying enough and trying to take the steps necessary with our local police forces and more broadly. I testified in front of Congress earlier this week on Wednesday, and you can find that testimony on YouTube, where I was talking about the Department of State and the fact that changes need to be made in that agency, across government agencies, across America. But Black people are not in this fight alone at this time. And I'm extraordinarily hopeful, convinced that change will come at this time.
So what impact do you think that the message that has been sent to the rest of the world, because we've seen people taking to the streets all around the world?
Yes, well, I think the United States for many, many years may have been a little preachy from time to time, but we felt very confident in not only our systems of government, where now we know there are weaknesses and that we have to guard against it. We cannot take them for granted because a lazy citizenry allows a few people to take control and do things that the majority of the country do not want done. That's one thing. The second thing is we've held ourselves up as a model for a nation striving to reach the best for all of its citizens. So we have spoken to other governments about human rights, about civil rights, about peaceful protest. And again, we have front and center that we are not perfect. We've got to keep striving. And I have to tell you that Americans absolutely appreciate the rest of the world standing up, speaking up, stepping out, and holding us accountable. So that we can better hold ourselves accountable.
You hold quite a lot of talks and I think webinars also these days, championing leadership for women and also for Black Americans. Can you tell us a bit more about, yes, but also that people have equal opportunities?
Absolutely. Well, foreign policy is my business. It's been my life for many years. And I have learned over that time what is common sense. You cannot have the best decision-making, the best policy. Everyone cannot bring their expertise, their experiences, and their background and knowledge to the table. That goes for women, for whatever our background. You know, we spoke, I had my time in Saudi Arabia saying you can't do your best as a nation if you're only using 50% of that nation. So women are not yet where we need to be in the United States. So I'm a founder of an organization that promotes women's leadership. And we need to be able to have all Americans, African Americans, Asian Americans, Hispanic, at the table to bring that knowledge for how we're conducting ourselves internationally. We can do a better job.
Yes. I'd like to refer to the presidential campaign in the US. What impact has the killing of George Floyd and also the management of COVID? In your opinion, what impact are they going to have on the campaign?
I think both are going to have a significant impact. I think both have shown us what we have come to learn over these last 3 years is that our current leadership is not up to today's challenges. We need a leader who is going to bring the country together. We have had turmoil and discord, and we need to be brought together again to focus on what needs to be done to get our nation back on track and moving forward in the way that American ideals, the American values, the American Constitution, our phrase of a more perfect union. And our current leadership is not interested in union. He is not interested in bringing us together, and he makes no bones about it. He doesn't even try. He doesn't pretend to try. So as Americans, we might have looked beyond that, some of us, because of a strong economy, but looking at how COVID has been managed from a national level, which has been very poor indeed, and there's no one except for our current leader who would tell you otherwise. It's clear our failures. If you can look at a country like South Korea and the United States that have the same cases on the same day, and look where South Korea is and look where we are, the comparison does not hold up. So we know we can do better. We need a leader who's going to put his or her, we're going to have a female vice president, trust in science, in those who are experts, as opposed to simply those who like him. And so we've got to do a better job. This murder of George Floyd and the protest after, we had today a tweet from the president who threatened protesters in Oklahoma tomorrow, who said, among other things, that protesters, which is legal and a right and something that is valuable in any nation, that right to protest. And he tweeted that protesters won't be treated with kid gloves. The President of the United States. This is something that we are going to look back on. In coming years, there will be books written as to how we got there and what we have learned and how we have pulled ourselves back.
I'd like to draw in Dr. Borch-Knight just to make some comments about what Her Excellency is speaking with us about.
Yes, I think obviously when Her Excellency is speaking, she's speaking from literally being very close to what is happening. I mean, as much as we follow the news, I think when you're actually there in the country, it makes a difference. And also in terms of politics, I think we can have a view, and it's okay to have a view. But again, I also believe that it's very much dependent on the Americans, because at the end of the day, it is their country and it is how they feel towards one president or perhaps a different choice. So I do think that I'm very cautious when I am actually commenting on foreign campaigns and foreign elections, because sometimes you have to put yourself in the shoes of the people actually living in the country. How do they feel? How do they perceive that? Whether the president currently is actually giving them what they want, or are they looking for an alternative? What is it that the people want? So I think it is something which is very important to always keep in mind. With regards to the COVID-19 pandemic, obviously, I think there has been criticism, and I also believe that hindsight is a beautiful thing, because it was also a pandemic which clearly hit us by surprise. It was a pandemic which every country dealt with differently. I do believe that when you follow the news again, but as well, I'm also very cautious, because I think sometimes you can get a bit carried away with the way the media portrays what is actually going on. But I think, obviously, yes, it's probably in my personal opinion, maybe they left it a little bit too late, and maybe things could have been done a little bit better. But as I said, hindsight is always a beautiful thing. Also, I have to comment on the George Floyd.
Yes, we do. I mean, that's something that we took very seriously.
Yes, of course, of course. And obviously, probably I raise a question in this, you know, has it been pivotal enough for us to see change? Because obviously we have seen murders before. For example, I've done also some research, and when I was looking up, I was realizing, you know, we had Stephen Clark, Michael Brown, Breonna Taylor. There were quite a lot of these unfortunate murders. So obviously the question that arises is it going to be the George Floyd murder that is going to change things, or will it be not? Will we
see more of it?
Will we see more of it? So that is a question which I think is legitimate to ask.
What do you think, Your Excellency? What do you think? Are we going to see more of this, or do you think this is going to be the last one?
I think we lost connection.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, Your Excellency, we disconnected. I hope you heard what my colleague Rosalind was saying. Do you think the George Floyd affair is going to be the last of its kind, or do you think we're going to see more of this in the United States?
This is what I'll say, because there have already been more. There was the case a couple of nights ago with the man who was drunk or sleeping off, being drunk at a drive-through at a fast food restaurant, and he was shot in the back by police. So that led to the resignation of the police chief, and I believe charges brought against the officer who shot him. I mean, keep in mind in the United States that police officers have what we call qualified immunity. So even when they do things that you or I, if we did the same thing, we would be charged and probably in jail. Police officers can get away with it. It is something that we struggle with because they do a very difficult job, and we want them to feel confident in doing that job. But they are armed, and they are there to protect and serve. And because we give them an arm, we also have higher standards for them. They're not criminals. People often say, well, what about black on black violence? And I ask, how can you compare a criminal with a police officer? The police officer is supposed to do the right thing. You don't expect criminals to do the right thing. Where I think George Floyd is making a difference, as I said earlier, is the fact that Black people are not out there alone anymore saying enough is enough. The difference with this is that there are white Americans out there with us. There are Hispanics and Asians and people who do not have to deal with racism on a daily basis. White people are now educating themselves in a way that they didn't bother before, understanding that just because you yourself don't feel as if you are a racist, the fact that you ignore it or benefit from it is an indifference that is part of the problem. If you are not part of the solution, you are part of the problem. And people are understanding that, which is why the demonstration I went to on Saturday was mostly women, yay us, but we looked like the United Nations. I mean, from everywhere, old, young, looking like everything. And we were all out there saying, Black Lives Matter. We need police to protect and serve, and we need change. So that's why I think this one is different. And people like me who have succeeded in the current system. And that's when I speak about this, I have to acknowledge I'm one of the successful ones. I came from a family with education and background and have been able to prosper and succeed in my chosen profession. But have I had challenges along the way? Absolutely. And again, I testified on Wednesday about some of the challenges that I have had to overcome to be able to contribute to the best of my ability. So if someone with me with the background and the mentor I had at the time still had challenges to do my best for those who didn't have the education, didn't have parents who could move to a better jurisdiction, because in the United States, if you live in a wealthy area, your taxes only go for your schools. And if you live in a poor area right next door, those property taxes are what fund the schooling. So you can have children living literally blocks away from each other, one who is destined to prosper and do well, and one who never has a chance because they are undereducated. These are some of the foundational problems we have to address in this country. And George Floyd is getting us to ask questions about all of it.
May I ask, just before we leave you, former President Obama, how much do you think he'll be involved in the campaign for the next US election?
Yes. Well, he has made speeches. He has done fundraising for President Biden. Many of his former competitors are out on the trail for Vice President Biden, including Senator Klobuchar, Mayor Buttigieg, whose family I met while I was in Malta. Cory Booker, Senator Harris, all of them are out because we all understand we need a change in leadership. I have the privilege of being a strong supporter of his as well. I know the America that we can be, that we must be, and we have withdrawn from our responsibilities, in my view, in the international fora, and we need to get back to trying to be a force for good, not saying it's all about us and only about us, because that's where we are now.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Once again, thank you, and I wish you a very good evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was Her Excellency Gina Abercrombie Winstanley, former US Ambassador of Malta. Just to close this part of the program, because we'll be back very soon, just to recap on what we've heard so far, Rosalind.
I think it was very interesting, and also I do really have admiration for Her Excellency, especially because I am also an advocate for women's rights and women in leadership. I think it's very important that we all work together. I strongly believe that diversity, whether in the workplace, whether at the political level, at every level, enriches a country and it only adds value. And this is why I feel very strongly about the fact that we need to keep working together and we need to support each other, because at the end of the day, we are here to always make life better. It's one of the reasons why I myself got into politics. And I always believe that if we all contribute in our own way, whether it's a speech, whether it's setting an example, whether it's leading a protest, whatever it is, I think it's very important that we come together and share responsibility, because at the end of the day, we are all responsible to improve the world that we are living in.
Thank you very much. Thank you. We'll be back with you soon. I'm with Dr. Rosalind Borchnight.